Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we're off adventuring into the spaces between. Being broadcast live tonight, of course, on Truth Frequency Radio, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live, and also on YouTube. So, hi, YouTube. And no matter how you are listening, make sure you stop and chat in or say hi in one of the chat rooms. Or you can always send me the email at wildepaisley@gmail.com. That is WILDEPAISLEY at gmail.com. If you wanted to see what's going on in my world, not that I've had the brain space lately, but I do try to update the website regularly, and that is www.paisleywild.com. And let's see, if you want to support the radio habit, you absolutely can. You can do the cash tag, that is $TheSpacesBetween. And while you're doing your research, check out ialife.com. ialife is the official sponsor for Truth Frequency Radio. ialife combines the best non-psychoactive properties of the ayahuasca plant along with some high-quality CBD to support you. Because you know what? We all need just a little bit of support sometimes. As you can tell, my voice is a little bit better tonight. We'll see how it goes. Last night, towards the end of the show, it was starting to fade just a little bit. Mostly because I haven't really been talking a lot the last couple weeks. It's been brutal, man. I'm just not accustomed to not being able to speak loudly, so this is kind of nice. I'm getting there. Nothing like a good sinus infection to bring in November, right? It's just awesome. If I tell myself that often enough, I'll believe it, right? For those of you that were local, we did have the Hectic Eclectics coffee get-together today. It's kind of unusual for us to have it on a Saturday, just because normally we do it on Sundays, and businesses are a little quieter and all that. Thanks, Jem. But it really felt like Saturday was a better day, just in general. So maybe moving forward, we're going to start doing more Saturday get-togethers rather than Sunday. So the website will be updated. And then there's a lot of interest expressed as far as having some Zoom-type get-togethers, just because here in the Northern Hemisphere, winter is coming. And we've had a couple snow flurries here locally. The ski resort definitely has some snow on it, and it's just going to happen. Winter happens, and I think it's going to start off a little slow, and then it's going to just... We're going to notice. We're going to notice the snow, I think, this year, in a big way. So that being said, remote get-togethers, that may just be the way to go. That way we're not worried about driving on the slick roads, and everybody can still, participate and be safe all at the same time. And that, to me, is better than trying to have everybody get together. That being said, we'll still probably have monthly get-togethers, but also do Zoom get-togethers. And I like this plan. I just need to make sure that my brain is going to work with this plan because, just like everybody else, I only have so much brain space. Some days I just can't. But the advantage of doing a Zoom conference or get-together for Hectic Eclectics and all that is it doesn't have to be late. It can be in the afternoon. And I know sometimes this later hour is a little harder for folks, and I get it. I really do. It's just the way of things. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that looks in the coming months. If you have any ideas or suggestions, by all means, let me know. Again, the email, wildepaisley@gmail.com, works exceptionally well. I do check that regularly. I get the pop-ups on the phone, the computer, the tablet, the laptop. Not the tablet, just the laptop, and the phone. The phone makes a lot of noise. I try to mute that once in a while just so I can take a nap. So, yeah, rolling with it. The call line is open tonight, so if you do want to give a call, absolutely do so. That number is 213-233-3998. Or if you're across the pond in the UK, the number is 44203-393-2871. If you have any ideas, thoughts, opinions, questions, concerns, by all means, give a shout out or, again, say something in the chat rooms or send me the email. And if you do call and I don't catch it, just say hey. But I'll try to check it periodically just so I don't miss it. I'm just making sure the email's open and that I didn't miss something. I haven't checked it for a couple hours. Tonight's show, we're talking about the Broom Closet just a little bit. And the reason why is, well, the Broom Closet's pretty darn comfortable. We know what's there. We know what to expect. Broom Closet, Pagan Pantry, whatever you want to call it. And what that means when we as pagans and witches talk about the broom closet or the pantry, it's not that we're hiding necessarily or coming out as in the LGBTQ community. This is more a spiritual kind of a thing. And it's important that we need to remember it's a spiritual thing. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is it's hard. And it's comfortable. And often we don't want to rock that boat. Because when we start telling our friends and our family that we believe differently than they do, often there's some pushback and some misunderstandings, and it can be painful in several ways. First off, a lot of folks don't like necessarily to share their spiritual path with their friends and family. Maybe they grew up, as I did, in a conservative Christian household, conservative Abrahamic faith household, and that happens, and it's okay. When that happens, often from birth, we're indoctrinated into that specific path. Excuse me, and it's hard to let go of the structure of the Abrahamic path and the beliefs of it. And since we grew up in it, we often know or are familiar with the dogma within the Abrahamic traditions. And I generally speak of Christianity specifically because that's what I've more experience with versus Judaism or Islam. And that's just all there is to it. But so for me, paganism is a spiritual journey. It's the pagan path. And straight up, as I've mentioned in the past and we've talked about in the past, to be pagan just means you are not of an Abrahamic faith or tradition or spirituality. It means you believe in a deity other than, or you follow a deity, I should say, other than Yahweh or a descendant of Yahweh. And for many of us, it's the path to becoming separate from Christianity is one of growth and often one of pain and transition. And for our family, often they're supportive. Often they want us to do different things and are excited for different things. And their beliefs are their own. And they assume, because you grew up just like they did, and your lives are so intertwined, that you must believe or have a similar spirituality to them. And often this just isn't true. That's why members of the same family often go to different churches, or they have different beliefs, they have different lifestyles, they have different political beliefs. Families have been divided by politics and religion pretty much ever since politics and religion became a thing in human society, because we're all different. We all have different experiences. We all have different wants and desires and needs. Unfortunately, today's society is a little bit more regimented in some of those beliefs, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch, and it's frustrating to experience both. Um, so, when it comes to being pagan, often we don't put a lot of those symbols of our belief or our spirituality out about our home for anybody to see, especially when we first embrace the pagan path from the Abrahamic traditions. You know, which in and of itself is kind of interesting because there's so many different pagan symbols and iconography that is very pagan, but shows up in a lot of the Abrahamic faiths and traditions. A lot of the holidays happen to occur in a similar time frame. I know, for instance, with my grandparents who survived the Depression and grew up in a different time altogether, my grandmother was switching out the decor, like the decorations, the trinkets, the tchotchkes, or whatever you want to call them, the bric-a-brac, debris. I have kids and a cat, and I have cats and a kid. It could be debris in my world. Seasonally, she had stuff for Easter and Christmas and summer and fall and Halloween and Thanksgiving and 4th of July and Veterans Day and Memorial Day. Memorial Day, we went to the graveyards and we helped clean the tomb or the tombstones for the family members that had passed. So, it's, you know, as someone, she was very, very, very Christian, very devout in her faith, but she also did all these little things that, you know, in retrospect, I'm like, well, that was kind of pagan there, Grams. And so was that, and so was that. And being the matriarch of the family, we just accepted it, and that was just the way of it. That's the way she grew up, and that's the way she raised her children, my aunts and uncles, and my father. And, you know, moving on, that's the way my generation grew up. And for a lot of us, it's the way our kids are growing up. We change out the seasonal decor. And, you know, it's, excuse me. So if you do change out your decor or your decorations or whatever seasonally, often we can add in different aspects of our pagan path along with the more secular type of decor that shows up in the grocery store or the box stores or what have you as we, you know, go through the calendar year. I know I tend to pick up a lot of Halloween stuff because it's witchy related around Halloween, even though, and I have it up all year round. Sugar skulls, signs, hats, that kind of thing. It doesn't really matter, just because it's kind of representative of me year round. And I see Christmas stores all over the place. I really want a year-round Halloween store, please, somebody. But yeah, it's just a way of putting your spirituality into your decor without it seeming like you are being aggressively pagan, and that's something else. Often, you know, the iconography with the Abrahamic traditions is very out there. People wear crosses all the time. They have crosses hanging in their house. There are pictures of the Victorian opinion of what Jesus looks like, or the angels, or angel statues, or the nativity scene, or, you know, flags, or they have the fish on the back of their car, that kind of thing. And hey, Trace, those are all symbols that they have embraced and they put out there. And some of them are more in your face than others. And those are often the door knockers, the ones that, hi, have you, do you know you're Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior? And you're like, but I'm pagan. And they're like, oh, so you're going to go to hell. It's like, no, I don't believe your religion, so I'm not going to go to your afterlife. I'm going to go to mine. It's more fun. Doesn't have as much brimstone, hellfire, and damnation. It just doesn't. But anyways, those people, the ones that get in your face about it, drive me insane. Um, they they really do actually. Um, it's one thing to be spiritual and just be open with your spirituality. It's like, hey, this I wear the the jewelry that represents my faith, that kind of thing. But when you come up to someone and say, hey, I'm going to pray for you today, you're kind of stepping across the line. It's kind of like it'd be similar to a witch saying to their coworker, saying, I know you've been having some problems sleeping at night, so I'm going to make a witch bottle for you so you sleep better. Well, if it's unsolicited, that's when it becomes uncomfortable and you've crossed that line. Now, if you're having a discussion about comparative religion, which I wish comparative religion or comparative theology, which would be better than religion, should be a required class to graduate from high school, along with common sense, I I think there'd be greater understanding and less, in theory, less judgment of people who believe differently. I just do. So yeah, when you start coming out of the pagan pantry or the broom closet, you don't have to, overnight swap out anything that might seem Abrahamic or whatever faith and paint the walls red and hang pumpkins and skulls everywhere and have jars of who knows what hanging on the wall and, putting pagan iconography all over the outside of your house or signs or what have you. Often, just like, you don't know if somebody's an accountant by looking at them. Often we don't know if someone's a pagan by looking at them. So you can be spiritual about your pagan path without shoving it in somebody's face. I personally believe that regardless of your religion, you shouldn't be trying to stuff your religion into somebody's face. It's just not okay. We believe differently, and just accept it and move on. Um, Asset says, I definitely agree, but when I speak to people, I ask them, how did people connect with the universe, earth, or deities before the Bible? Right? Which version of the Bible? The connection with the divine, regardless of whom you consider the divine entity that you are working with, is very much a personal relationship. Just as each of us have a unique and special relationship with one another, each of us are going to have a different relationship with the divine. Regardless of how you grew up or what you've experienced, it's all going to be a little different. Now, in Christianity, the different denominations, Catholic, Lutheran, the conservative Lutheran, liberal Lutheran, Baptist, etc., Mormon, Seventh Day, I can go on. Those are all different denominations, and they're different in that they're the core beliefs or the core traditions of each of those different denominations varies a bit, and so the people that fit into those categories go to those different churches. Well, here within paganism, we're quite similar. We don't call them denominations, we call them traditions. So maybe you're an Asatru, maybe you're Wiccan, maybe you're Celtic, maybe you're Egyptian, Slavic, Norse, and there's so many different things out there. So we need to be aware of the different traditions, even though as a group we're pagan. Kind of like we're all crayons, just different colors, I guess you could say. I keep seeing all these advertisements for crayons with real skin-colored tones and stuff. It's like, yeah, we're all just a box of crayons, different colors. And so when we start thinking about what is it we're going to say or how are we going to approach our families and our loved ones and our friends when it comes time to come out of the pagan pantry. Because at some point, it's healthy to. It just is, because by not acknowledging that part of yourself to the people around you, the people you spend the most time with, in a way, you're limiting yourself. You're limiting your ability to interact with the divine. You're limiting your ability to interact with the people around you. And you're not really allowing your friends and family to get to know you. Now, for me, the transition to being more out there, if you will, and coming out of the pagan pantry involved initially just kind of not putting as much Christian type stuff out as decorations. I moved away from the nativity scene. I stopped, wanting an angel on the tree for Christmas. I was looking more for a star because that to me was more representative. And just slowly transitioned away from the more biblical verses and sayings and responses. So instead of saying, "Hey, I'll pray for you," they say, "I'll send you I send you love, energy, peace," that kind of thing. You are in my thoughts. It's just a different way of saying something similar, but it's more comfortable to me. And through time, even within my family that I live with, it was hard for me to really discuss my spirituality. Really hard to discuss it because none of us want to be judged or treated differently or looked at differently because we believe a little differently. We just want to be accepted as we are. Don't question us, don't tease us, don't taunt us, just leave us alone. I'm a little introverted, and that's part of my go-to response is to go hide. But I had set up an altar, and it was an out-of-the-way spot. It was in the house, so I knew that my family would see it eventually, and at some point I would have to answer questions about it. But I had it up for a while and was really comfortable with it being up before anybody noticed, which is interesting all by itself. But it's, I don't know, it was just the way of it. And my significant other asked me about it. I'm like, "Oh, well, it's an altar." And it's like, "Oh, when did that happen?" It's like, "Well, it's been kind of coming for a while." And it was just kind of an awkward conversation. But it went smoothly and it went well. And I'm accepted by my significant other just as I am. As far as my spirituality goes, my ability to do dishes and fold the socks properly, that's an entirely different story. We're still working on that one. Just because I do them differently. Which is just kind of funny. But, I hate dishes, just as a side note. I really hate doing the dishes. I do them, but I do not enjoy them. I enjoy having them done. So, yeah, it's weird. I get it. So, just explaining it to my significant other it was hard for me personally because I didn't want to be judged. And I think that's part of the reason why we have such a hard time sharing that part of ourselves with our family. Not because necessarily they're going to judge us more harshly, but more because their opinions have more value to us than, say, a stranger. What our family thinks of us tends to have more value than we often recognize. And because of that, it can be quite hard to share that inner part of yourself with your friends and your family and your loved ones. It just is, and that's part of human nature, unfortunately. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's frustratingly part of human nature. Nobody has ever said that people were easy. We're often quite complicated. Very complicated. So when it comes to coming out of the pagan pantry or the broom closet, often we have this assumption as to what that's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, and how it's going to go. Sometimes it's based upon the experiences we've had with our family because we know how they're going to respond to something. And sometimes it's because we're so unsure of where we're at still in our spirituality that it's hard to be confident because there's going to be questions. Like, when did this happen? Why do you believe that way? Are you going to hell? Is that actually a real question? And trying to figure out how you're going to respond to any of those questions before coming out of the pantry. Yeah, that can be quite hard. And I get it. So, on that note, it is bottom of the first hour already. Can you believe that? I swear time flies when we're doing this. So we're going to go to break. When we come back, We're going to keep talking about stuff, and we'll see you in a few. Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we're off adventuring into the spaces between here on Truth Frequency Radio and on YouTube. Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a fantabulous day that ends in Y. It's a lovely Saturday evening here. It's a rainy Saturday evening. If it was about 10 degrees cooler, we'd have snow, not rain. I'm kind of glad we're not quite to the snowy part of the year yet. It can wait about 3 more weeks. Generally, I like my snow to happen after Thanksgiving. That's just my opinion. Does it happen that way every year? No. We've had snow mid-October. North Idaho is home to some very complicated weather patterns at times. Gotta love the mountains, right? Let's see here. So, we're talking about coming out of the pagan pantry, the broom closet. It's been hard, especially the last 100 years or so. It's been very, very much kept under wraps. You don't talk about it. You aren't out. If you're using home remedies and natural treatments and stuff, you're considered a granola loving hippie here in the U.S. Is that something you really did? Not necessarily. Not even necessarily were you a hippie, but that was just how you were treated, and the assumption that you were just kind of weird and out there. Not so much that you were a witch, but you were a hippie, which came with its own set of assumptions and such. With the recent uptick in supernatural-esque TV shows, the acceptance level of witchcraft and paganism has definitely increased. Hollywood has really done a lot to bring witchcraft and paganism to the mainstream, I suppose, the mainstream media, and it's made it more acceptable. And those same granola loving hippies, they started with the essential oils and the different incenses and stuff that have been around for a while, and it's just been a trend and becoming more and more acceptable to be a pagan or a witch. If you get the Times in the UK, the Sunday Times, they had an article, today actually, it was published, the 13th, about how pagans want to support the end of the abuse of believers. It's an article by Mark Horn, and it's a really good article if you have a chance to read it. I'm not going to quote it completely. I'll have a link in the show notes, just that way if you do want to look it up, you can. While I'm talking, I'll try to do this. Basically, the concern is that for so many years now, the ancient faiths have fallen out of favor. Christianity was on the rise, and Christianity pretty much stomped all over any ideas of believing in the ancient faiths, ancient traditions, and following those paths, communicating more with our ancestors and the gods of our forefathers. And it's frustrating because in doing that, we've lost so much information, so much culture, tradition, just so much of who we were as people back then. It's very formative and influences of who we are today, but we don't have that, and it's unfortunate. I have a feeling it's in a library somewhere, just not one that most of us can access, because if you control the information, then you control a lot of things. And we'll leave it at that. I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, sometimes just a skosh, but I try to keep it under my hat as much as possible. That's all. So yeah, you read the article, because paganism has been more accepted in recent years, and it seems like it's on the rise. Is it really? Or some of it, I think, is children rebelling against their parents. Some of it is just a dissatisfaction with what they grew up with, and they're trying to find something else. Whatever it is, there are more and more people coming to the pagan traditions and following the pagan path. Some of them will stay, and some of them will return to Christianity, and that's just the way of it. Some will just become more atheist or Gnostic, or no, they won't commit to any type of religion of any sort, which is fine. To each their own. We're all individuals. We all have a slightly different path that we have to walk. So, because paganism is becoming more and more accepted, we're seeing a rise in the clergy representation. Pagan chaplains are showing up in universities and hospitals and in the military, in the schools even, just around the world. And it's becoming more and more accepted and is being put on the same status level, if you will, of Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, Christianity, etc. And I think it's awesome that we're becoming more acceptable. Or accepted. Not acceptable. Accepted. We've always been acceptable. You just had to put your dogma away and accept us, for crying out loud. So when it comes to telling our family then that we don't go to church because we're not Christians, often the first response is, oh gosh, my kids are going to hell or whatever because they're not Christian. Or they say they're an atheist or something, and they're like, oh no. But when it comes, we at least believe in something, right? We actually have a really strong set of beliefs. And it's hard to put into words sometimes. Could I come out to my grandmother today if she was still alive and tell her that I'm pagan? I don't know. Honestly. I'm not sure. Just because her viewpoints on religion were so structured and so absolute, I don't know. I don't know if I could share with her. But my parents know, I think, without telling them, just because my parents are smart. It's amazing. Growing up as kids, we start off, our parents know everything. They're the world. And then we move into that whole teenage angsty period where our parents know nothing. And then through our 20s, we're like, well, we know nothing. Because in our teens and such, we know everything. Move in our 20s, we know nothing. We have to learn things. And by our 30s or 40s, we're like, oh my gosh, my parents really had it together. My parents divorced, they still had it together. They're pretty smart. So in thinking about it, and my parents now, we just don't talk about it. It's one of those don't talk, don't tell things, right? Or don't ask, don't tell. We just don't talk about it. I have one sister that knows, one sister that doesn't. The one that doesn't, she'll find out next time she comes to visit because I refuse to put so much of this stuff away. And not enough room. I don't have that many boxes. Just sitting here, I have 1, 2 brooms, 3 staffs, 2 headpieces. Oh, there's another broom. There's a sign, 2 signs. There's some candles. Oh, make that 3 signs. A couple bookshelves full of stuff. I got a crystal ball in front of me, a dragon, some other stones. I got some candles over my shoulders. There's just no way I can put all. And this is just in a small 1-room area. So trying to hide all this is just not going to happen. It's not. And I'm okay with that, honestly, because this is who I am. And I am so much more comfortable just being me. By coming out of the pagan pantry a bit, it's like a weight came off of my shoulders by acknowledging this aspect of me, and sharing this aspect with me has helped with my mental health. And I think that's something that we often forget when we keep things hidden from our friends and our family, is the impact it has on our mental health, keeping that secret, that aspect of us. Now, that being said, I totally understand that there is a certain section of our society that will never accept that we're pagan. And sometimes we're related to those people, sometimes we're not. We've all met at least one of them. They tend to be judgmental for many different things, not just our religious affiliations and our spirituality, which is none of their business, but they still judge us for it. And so I get if you have one of those narrow-minded members or narrow-minded peoples in your family, as a member of your family or friends group or whatever, I get it. And so sometimes you do have to hide things, or at least not have them blatant. I see all sorts of things being sold in just local stores even, that are pagan in reality. But if you don't know that they're pagan, then what? So it's there's things out there that you can use to represent your faith and your beliefs without, again, shouting it from the rooftops and painting big, sigils and such all over your walls so everybody driving by can see. Often it's the little things. And those same little things that we do that represents our spiritual path, well, they often have a lot of power as well. Maybe it's the simple saging of your home, salt in your rooms. Maybe it's different crystals and stones, around your home space, your office space, or upon your person, the jewelry you wear. It's like, oh, hey, that's a really great pair of earrings. Where'd you get it? Oh, I got it from the local rock shop. Oh, cool. Do you always wear malachite? Well, no, just when I happen to wear green. Whatever it is, those little things that are representative and often become a heavier touchstone or a stronger touchstone than the things we have out loud and proud. I have a couple witch signs. They're awesome. I love them. Are they part of my altar? No. If I didn't have them, would it be a hardship? No. They're signs. It's not necessarily mean I'm less of a witch if I don't have them. I have 2 staffs that I'm looking at. Would I be less of a witch if I didn't have them? No. I'd still be a witch. Do I have to call them a pagan staff, or they're affiliated with my paganism or anything like that? No, I don't have to tell anybody that. There's my walking sticks. My cane, I could refer my cane as, because I do have one, because I need one every so often. You can get really fancy carved wood canes with different creatures and critters and faces and such all over them. Or you can just have a plain Jane serviceable one. Could any of that be a magic wand? Sure. I just call my cane a beaten stick. Actually, it's more of a door catcher than a beaten stick even, because people don't pay attention to doors. So you just open them and let them slam in front of you. Well, if my hands are full, I'll put my stick in the way. But so what I'm saying is often those big symbols of the pagan path, you don't need them, regardless of what Etsy says or Pinterest or Reddit or any of Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media page you're using or social media you follow. You don't have to have a big altar. Honestly, your altar could look like these 2 candles over my shoulder. They're just candles. How many households have candles in them? Lots. Maybe that's representative of my altar. Okay, cool. Could I add some other decor there? Yeah, I could put some string around the candles. I could put it on a tray with some rocks and some shells or, whatever. And it'd all be representative of the different elements or different parts of my life and my path without looking like it's part of my path. I guess what I'm saying is sometimes we have to hide in the pagan pantry, and I get it. So let your spirituality come out in other ways, whether it's being sure you're ethically sourcing the fibers in your clothing or the things you're putting in your decor for your house or your car or whatever. Paying attention to the environment a little bit more. It's not that hard. Or gardening. Maybe you have a flower garden. Maybe you have an herb garden. Maybe you have a vegetable garden. Maybe you have all 3. Maybe you just like to garden. Doesn't mean you're a witch anymore, necessarily. It just means you like to garden. Well, maybe that's where your touchstone is for your spirituality. That's okay. It really is. Hopefully by next weekend, this will be gone. Just saying. This weird, cracky hoarseness and cough I am done with. I'm ready to move on to something else. So yeah, when it comes to your belief set, those are yours. Your relationship with the divine is your relationship. You don't have to tell anybody about it. You don't have to share it with anyone else. You don't have to wear it on your sleeve. You don't have to paint it on your front door or put it on a bumper sticker on your car. If you feel called to do that, that's an entirely different thing. Just like I'm starting the process to work with hospice and the local hospital here as a pagan priestess. We need someone like that in our community. And as a friend of mine said today, be the change you want to see in the world as she contemplates her next grand adventure. It's a grand adventure. And if we want to see ourselves be more accepted by society, we have to remember to accept ourselves also. With all of the, I'd say warts and gray hairs and wrinkles and all that, but you don't want warts, you don't have those moles, gray hairs, wrinkles, we can leave with that. Quirks, idiosyncrasies, pocket full of rocks, whatever it is. I mean, I've got three rocks right here just I could play with. And a dragon and some other stuff. There's a lot of stuff on the desk here. So, and we'll do singing bowl after the break because singing bowls are awesome. So, and they're all just part of who I am. Anyways, also another way to represent your faith or your pagan path. For me, includes a lot of ancestor respect, honoring my ancestors. I have pictures of my ancestors. Does it look like an altar? No. But I know by looking at those images, those are my ancestors. And they're going to help me move through life. Do they necessarily like the things they do? I don't know. But I think it'll be okay. So, that being said, there's an article I came across while we're researching things for the show tonight, and it's an article that was in pathos.com by John Beckett. It's 9 Things My Ancestors Tell Me, and the link will be in the show notes because it's an interesting article, and I don't read it word for word. It's just interesting. So, as he was writing it, something he came up with a list, I guess, the 9 things my ancestors tell me. One of them is straight up in bold print, and I really like it, and it basically says, we owe toxic ancestors nothing. Period. And it's not just ancestors, family. We owe toxic people nothing. Period. If they are toxic to us or have caused grief or harm to us, we don't owe them an explanation. We don't owe them forgiveness or acceptance or anything like that. If you choose to forgive someone for a wrong that they've done, it's for you, not for them. It's because you're ready to set that little bit of baggage down and walk away from it. You don't need it anymore. You don't need to carry that burden. So remember that as we talk about honoring our ancestors and stuff. If they're toxic people, you don't need them. And you don't need that. So the very first thing that Mr. Beckett says is, I mostly hear a collective. What he means is the ancestors as a group, and it's sometimes there's a single spokesperson, sometimes it's not. If you get to see Mulan, the cartoon version with Disney, and when she runs off to go join the army, and the ancestors are all carrying on and talking to each other, and oh no, what are we going to do to save Mulan? It's just this dull roar in the background. And there's several voices, often talking together, arguing, discussing things, and we might hear bits and pieces and snippets of it, but maybe we don't. Maybe we just need one voice to stand up and talk to us and say something. Maybe it's an older ancestor. Maybe it's a newer ancestor. It depends when it comes to our ancestors and what they choose to speak of or speak to when it comes to a question that we're posing, or advice that we're asking for, or guidance that we're requesting. And if you don't know the name of the ancestor, you just don't. And it's like you just give the general thanks to the ancestors. You don't have to name them specifically. It's like, hey, crazy Aunt John, or Uncle Aunt, yeah, that works. Crazy Aunt John. Thanks for the advice. It didn't work out. Or, Aunt Tilly or Uncle Buddy or whatever. You say thank you in general. You don't have to be specific. For a lot of our ancestors, death changes things. And so the dogma that they were entrenched with when they were living changes a little bit after death, because they've seen the other side. And that dogma is frustrating, and there's an assumption that that's just the way of it. So, and because the ancestors, maybe they really, really invested in Christianity, for instance, and then when they die, they see what's really there, and they're like, well, shoot, that's it? And others are like, woohoo, that's it, this is awesome, we're there. It varies a little bit. Some are happy with their afterlife and some are not. But generally speaking, the dogma eases a bit. So even though I couldn't necessarily tell my grandmother while she was living that I'm a pagan, after her death, I feel very accepted by her. Very warmed and comforted by her. And in a way that I didn't get to experience when she was living. And that's really interesting to me because she was often very judgmental and very dogmatic when she was living. And I have a feeling that, post-death, her dogma has gone to take a nap, and she's more relaxed and accepting, and she's okay with it. And if anything, I truly believe that my ultra-conservative Christian grandmother, really conservative, is happy that I'm on this path. And that's the sense sorry, I had to do laundry. But that is the sense that I get from her now that she's passed on. My daughter still talks to her periodically. She's written her a couple letters that we send off in the fire every so often, and it's heartwarming, I suppose, the relationship that my daughter has with my grandmother, especially post-death. It's like my grandmother's there holding her hand and guiding her in a way to experience life differently than my grandmother ever had the chance to do. Because of the times that she grew up in, she wasn't allowed to be very independent. She wasn't allowed to do many things by society. That, as she aged, she did some of those anyways. But I really feel that she is encouraging my daughter to be the independent, extraordinarily busy individual that she is. And I'm okay with that. I think it's great, actually. I'm not weirded out by it. I can feel a little bit more judgment from my grandfather who passed, let me think about this, 27 years ago. I have a lot more judgment from him than my grandmother who passed just a couple of years ago. More acceptance from my grandmother. Absolutely. And really, truly, it's that warm, fuzzy feeling. And I don't think I would have gotten that from her pre-death. So, yeah, death definitely softened her dogma and has made her more accepting of things that she wasn't very comfortable with pre-death. I'm going to stop there before I go on to the next one because, hey, guess what? It's top of the hour already. Can you believe that? Time just flies. So we're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to do some singing bowl, and I'm going to pick up with this article, and we're going to continue on to the next one on the list by Mr. Peckham. And I guess we'll see you in just a few. This is Paisley Wild. You're listening to The Spaces Between here on TFR, Truth Frequency Radio, and YouTube. See you in a few. Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we're off adventuring into the spaces between. Tonight, we're just talking about our spirituality a bit, and our ancestors a bit, and just kind of going with the flow a bit. Just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and for now, a little bit of singing bowl. Some nights that bowl is just extraordinarily loud. Tonight was one of them, and that's good because sometimes we just gotta let it out, right? Tell the world how we feel. So before break, we're talking about an article from pathos.com, 9 Things My Ancestors Tell Me by John Beckett. Article link will be in the show notes. We're at number 3. Number 3 is, number 2, people have softened on their dogmatism, or their dogma after death. Some, number 3, are just disappointed that they're no longer part of that religion. So maybe you've left Christianity or whatever tradition you were with, and now that you're not doing that, they're not sure what to think. They're just disappointed. For the most part, Christianity has been a very important part of our ancestors' lives, especially in recent centuries. And for many of them, religion is more than just what they believed. It was an integral part of their identity. They're part of, pillars in their church community. Maybe they're elders or assistant pastors or Sunday school teachers or ushers or what have you. And so, and the devotions and everything else. So their beliefs and the way they believed, their religion was a really big part of their life. And tradition has often been really important and foundational to society. Following the traditions, creating new traditions, whatever it is. That when you walk away from that tradition, our ancestors are sometimes disappointed, and sometimes our living family is disappointed. Sometimes they get it. Are they judging us from the afterlife? Well, maybe a little bit. Maybe they're more envious that they didn't have that same choice available to them to step away from the Christian path or the religion that they were a part of. And because they're in the minority or they don't feel comfortable saying, hey, I wanted to make that choice too, instead they keep it quiet and they're just quietly supportive. There's nothing wrong with being quietly supportive of anybody. It does help to give out a hug occasionally or say, hey, I believe in you. But quietly supportive, I'll take that any day over loudly critical. 100%. Hey, Alan. Alan in the chat says, sometimes I think a lot of traditions just keep people stupider than they would be otherwise. I think there's something to that, actually, Alan. If you're told what to believe all the time, and that's the only way to believe, you keep following and doing the things that you're told to do by the elders or the people in the church or the authorities in the church, and religion has been a tool of control for millennia, unfortunately. And it's a power thing a little bit. Sometimes, power thing a lot. Sometimes it's a money thing. But a lot of that really is just keeping people from being independent and following their own destinies. Thank you, Alan. I am glad to be here. I'm a little froggy still. I can feel it trying to make me hack and cough again. I'm trying to keep that under control. It's been October and November have not been my months this year. So, granted, we're still new in November. It's barely the midpoint, so there's still hope that November will turn around and be really positive. Until then, I'm going to be a little scratchy and froggy. That's okay though. Number 4 on this list, by Mr. Beckham, is they don't want to be part of a pagan ritual. So, a lot of our ancestors are going to be pleased that we do remember them and that we do honor them. Very much so, because nobody wants to be forgotten. We all want to be remembered for something. Generally something positive, preferably, but not something negative. And they're all happy to be part of that shrine and that memorial. They don't necessarily all want to be part of a pagan ritual. And I can understand that. They're not necessarily offended as a group. They just may not show up to support you for a ritual. So the ones that do, you need to pay extra special attention to if you're needing that extra energy from your ancestors. For me, when I'm doing a ritual, if I need to invoke my ancestors, it's I just say ancestors that are available or those that are ready to help and such. Well, yeah, I like those. And not all ancestors are able to help at the same time. Not all have the same focus as each other, honestly. Some of them have a different focus. Some of them have different interests. Hi, Wanda. And I mean, for instance, my grandfather worked with his hands a lot. My other grandfather, he was ex-military. Those two men had absolutely nothing in common. At all. No. I'm trying to think of one thing they may have had in common, and I gotta tell you, I cannot think of any one of them they're definitely not in the same social circles, religion, anything. And as a result, there are things that I think my paternal grandfather will show up for to help and support me with, and there's things that my maternal grandfather will help and support me with. Sometimes they'll come together and support me at the same time, and sometimes you're like, dude, that's not our thing, and that's okay. Just as they were individual in life, they're individual in death. So I just generally try to honor my ancestors and ask for the energy that's available. I'm sorry, Wanda. It's the funerals do drain energy, unfortunately. So, yeah, when it comes to our families, families can be draining, living or dead. Oof. Excuse me. Oh, thank you. Wanda says I am the common factor in my grandfathers. Yeah, that would be it. Really, truly. Thank you. I did see right there in front of my face, literally, and I didn't even see it. So sometimes we need somebody to poke us a little bit and remind us of something. So number 5 on this list is not all family or want an offering of whiskey or beer or anything alcoholic. They don't. And when it comes to our ancestors, that's something we do need to pay attention to. So one side of my family, alcoholism is a big deal. So are they going to be as responsive to an alcoholic beverage as an offering? Probably not. Wine might be a little different because wine's generally considered a little bit more high class than beer is. And for a lot of them that do believe, or that were Christians, Jesus turned water to wine. So they may be happy to accept wine. Wine was often used in communion, or it still is used in communion quite often. But they may be happier to accept food, like desserts or breads. There's a lot of German in my background. Sausage. I don't know. Schnitzel. Wiener Schnitzel. It's hard to say. So in some ways, you really do have to pay attention to what our ancestors dealt with to understand what they may or may not appreciate as an offering. And if they may not want whiskey or beer, a food item might be better. And that's okay. Number 6 on the list. Um, Pouring good wine on the ground is a waste. So, a lot of my ancestors were not well-to-do. Some were, some were not. Um, it varied with the century, I think. And okay, before Alan in the chat says, I rarely drink alcohol. After I pass away someday, I don't want alcoholic offerings from my descendants. See, it's not his jam. It's not his thing. So an alcoholic offering, probably not appropriate. For me, like a dumb tea with my grandmother, it's tea. She would drink tea or that International Delight coffee or just a cup of hot water. That was her gig, her jam. And so, in a way, it really simplifies the dumb tea time or dumb coffee time, because I can remember her without necessarily having a lot of stuff. So, yeah, going back to number 6 here, pouring good wine on the ground is a waste. A lot of my ancestors were very well-to-do, and some were not. And for those that struggled to get by, to pour wine or other offerings on the ground is a waste, and waste was quite the sin. So, if for me, when I'm leaving an offering, especially if it's one that's going to be outside, I try to leave it someplace where the wildlife can eat it or drink it. I'm not really big on pouring wine onto the ground, but I have left the dregs from my wine making at the base of my oak tree or my plum tree or one of my elderberry trees. And it's because those nutrients can compost into the soil and help energize the soil. And so for me, that's not being a waste, it's repurposing. Repurposing is a little bit different than just wasting. Some people, after having an offering for their family members, their ancestors, they will then eat or drink the things on their altar, because their ancestors can often sense the drink or the food through the descendant. For me, it just doesn't feel appropriate, so generally speaking, I try to leave whatever the offering was out for the critters. I've seen the deer come through and eat things. The chickens will eat things. Chickens will eat anything, by the way. And basically, I'm repurposing, and so that to me is not a waste. It's putting something to good use. But I do pay attention. Some things just don't seem appropriate for an offering. Like my grandmother didn't smoke, so I wouldn't leave tobacco. My grandfather did, so tobacco would be okay. And tobacco kind of blows away if it's loose. So, yeah. Mr. Beckett, number 7 here, is they're proud that I can travel. So, when we look back through history, travel used to be extraordinarily difficult, and it would take a long time. It was months to cross the ocean, months to cross the country, because the trains weren't very fast if they were around. Steam engines may or may not have been invented. The mode of transportation may have been a horse and buggy, or it may have been your own little 2 feet, whatever it was. It took a bit to travel and to go anywhere, to connect with family, loved ones. That's why communities were often a little more tight-knit, and your entire family often lived within the same county. So nowadays, we can travel anywhere. So for our ancestors that were not able to travel, often they look at us as the descendants, and they're like, whoa, you can go anywhere, you can do anything, which I think is awesome. Um, some of my ancestors, when they came over from Europe, they it was two brothers and a sister. The sister wanted to come to the U.S. The brothers both wanted to come to the U.S., but they also both wanted to go to South America. Instead of letting their sister go unescorted, which at the time was a really bad thing, they flipped a coin in New York, and one stayed in the U.S. and the other one to South America. Nowadays, those same ancestors, I think, are very appreciative at the ease of travel, even in pandemic times, how easily we can get around and see new things and how we can experience new things. They don't necessarily understand the internet, but they know that I can log online and I can look at places they never dreamed of going. I can experience and learn things they never dreamed of knowing, and I think it's awesome. Alan asks a really good question in the chat room. He goes, would a spirit of someone who often tried and failed to quit smoking really want tobacco? No, they really wouldn't. Just like an alcoholic really wouldn't want an alcoholic beverage. Or someone who struggled with weight might not really want food. It does vary. It's part of the reason why I put the offering out, outside, so the ancestors that want the thing, they can get the thing, and if they don't want the thing, then the wildlife can get the thing. Tobacco is often used more in a Native American type ancestor respect and offerings. Excuse me. But it is, a sacred herb, I guess. But there are other sacred herbs. Honestly, my own personal ancestors, or my descendants, they could leave an offering of coffee or chocolate, 100% acceptable. Absolutely. Next on the list is my ancestors worry about me being extravagant. And this is in part because they know from personal experience and observation both that wealth can change quickly, especially if you're careless. Imported goods 200 years ago, very expensive. A couple weeks ago, at some point, I talked about spices and the trade of spices and how the spice merchants were so wealthy. It's because the cost to ship that stuff was highly expensive, and they made a lot of money on it. So importing goods of any kind was often cost prohibitive. And so American made was the only way, or locally made or handcrafted was the only way to get something. Nowadays, often it's cheaper to have something shipped in from somewhere else. And they don't, so our ancestors aren't really excited about, who has the biggest TV or the fanciest car. They're looking for something that's lasting, something that is family heirloom, something treasured, and is really indicative of the things that our families have handed down throughout the years. I have dishes from a couple of great-great-greats, something in their grandfathers and grandmothers and stuff. I've got things that have been passed down through the generations from my ancestors. And it's just they appreciated that quality, the longevity that quality brings. Because if something is cheaply made, they don't really care. And often our ancestors really don't give two bits about showing off. So is the plain black tablecloth that you picked up at the thrift store that put over your altar as good as the fancy satin one that you got at the custom shop with custom embroidery? And honestly, if they're looking for a neutral tablecloth, they're probably going to be happier with the one you got from the thrift store. They just don't care as much. They're not interested in showing off. They're more interested in quality that lasts, which is why they developed the relationships they did and kept in touch the way they did. They were looking for the quality of things that lasted, not that just, flash in a pan kind of a thing. Something that our ancestors, number 9, might be concerned with that we don't always think about is, have you talked to your parents lately? Often, as we become adults and get involved in our own day-to-day lives, um, the family that we talk to daily growing up, we don't talk to as much. And it starts to get less and less. And suddenly, hey, it's been 3 months. I haven't called my mom. I am a bad child. Or if you got to the point where you're calling them once a week and you skip a week, I am a bad child. Our ancestors are often checking in on us to make sure that we are maintaining that familial relationship with the living family members too, not just the ones that have passed on. Like when my grandmother was approaching the time of her passing, I was calling her about once a week, sometimes twice a week, just to check in and see how she was doing, make sure she was doing okay, and let her know that I was thinking of her. She preferred letters, but I'm not very good at writing letters. I'm just not. Sending a card to someone for their birthday is a really hard thing for me. It's something I wasn't taught growing up, and so it's a chore, and I don't like doing it. So there. Do I do them? Yeah. Not as often as I should, but yeah. So, yeah, pay attention to the family that's living is the point here. Death comes on its own time. And so losing someone for whatever reason, and not touching base with them leaves a hole, if you will. The day my grandmother passed away, I was planning on calling her that afternoon. She passed away in the morning, and I felt like I missed something because I hadn't been able to say goodbye. It left a little bit of a hole for me. She's fine, but for me. And so remember to talk to your loved ones. And no matter how far away they are, no matter how estranged you might be, sometimes you just need to find a way to connect with your living family too. And it can be quite hard. Quite hard. And, these are just some guidelines that Mr. Beckett wrote here, and when it comes to our ancestors and what they tell us, often they tell us nothing because we're doing okay and they don't think that we really need a lot of guidance. Other times, they just want to smack us upside the head, Gibbs style, and tell us to get our head back in the game and get to it. Which sometimes we need that swift kick in the butt. But generally speaking, our ancestors are going to support us in what we're doing. Now, if whatever we're doing is counter to the values that they had when they were living, they may not help us as much. But they're pretty supportive of us, which for me is why I feel like honoring our ancestors is a huge part of my pagan path. A huge part. I have pictures of my grandparents in the living room, and I look at it pretty much 2 or 3 times a day, and I love that I can have that touchstone with them, or that ability to just kind of connect with them and make sure that, we're on the same page and we're doing good, and they're supporting me. And like I said, I feel that warmth and acceptance from my grandmother every day. Every day. And I am pleased, but and feeling that level of acceptance is phenomenal. Partly because I didn't feel it when she was living, because she did have that mantle of judgment and dogma that she wore pretty often, pretty firmly. And she put the dogma on and the judgment on with her shoes. I swear, it was pretty firm. And it got a little worse as she got older. She had less patience and less tolerance, but I think that's kind of normal. But now post death, she's a lot more accepting and understanding of the choices I've made and the things I do and my own path. So yeah, remember your ancestors. Talk to them, give them offerings, pay attention to what they like and what they don't like. You will know. And remember to call your family, touch base with them, send them a card, let them know you're thinking of them. And that's not just because we're going into a major family holiday season, but just in general. don't forget to connect with them because they're thinking about you too. And sometimes we just need to seem to touch base. Yeah. So, bottom of the hour, it's our last break for the night. We're going to go get some commercials. We'll be right back. Bye, guys. Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we are off adventuring into the spaces between here on Truth Frequency Radio, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, TalkStream Live, and on YouTube. Hi, everyone. Hope you guys are having a good day. Yeah, I kind of expected Lucky to check in too, but she had a crazy week. She volunteered to babysit, and And I'm sure she'll do it again because they're good kids, but even good kids take a lot of energy. Um, yeah. Yeah. Alan wishes Lucky well. Yeah, it's frustrating. Sometimes the things that we see that folks are dealing with, like a friend of mine right now, she's been in the local hospital, complications due to COVID. She ended up with COVID pneumonia, and she's been on a ventilator and an induced coma. And today she got life flighted to a slightly bigger hospital with a different pulmonologist. And I'm actually rather pleased that she went to the bigger hospital. I think she'll have better care. Not necessarily better care, extensive care, because she'll have the specialists available to help her get her oxygen where it needs to be so she can come home. And yeah, it's all around us. People are having problems, I'm seeing. And Mercury is not in retrograde, but man, I got to tell you, there's a lot going on in the world right now. And I think we need to pay really close attention to some of those goings on. Your plague diary or whatever. This feels your dystopian diary, maybe that's a better word for it, because it feels very dystopian right now. It just does. Just make sure you're doing what you need to do to take care of your family and your loved ones and your friends and yourself. Self-care. Excuse me. I went to the doctor because the sinus infection stuff, got an antibiotic, and I told him I was really tired. Well, I had COVID in October and wiped me out. I was a really sick pup there for a bit. And, yeah, I'm still pretty tired in the recovery phase. And talking to my doctor, he's like, it's okay. You're going to be tired. You're recovering. Even though you didn't go to the hospital, you're still sick and you're still recovering. Excuse me, sorry guys. And it's like, okay, so how do I treat that if I'm still tired no matter how much sleep I get? He goes, well, how do you feel about naps? I personally am very pro nap. I think naps are important. So basically I have a prescription to take a 2-hour nap every day until I stop feeling quite so wiped out. I have never had a doctor's note to take a nap before. I'm quite excited by it. Does that mean I took a nap today? No, not at all. Am I going to take a nap tomorrow? Who knows? We'll see what tomorrow brings. I should probably schedule one in, but I just haven't gotten there yet. So, yeah. As I was doing research for a show tonight and trying to decide, what it was that I wanted to talk about, there was another article that came up. It's Witchcraft Done Wrong. It's by Phoenix LaFay, another Pathos.com article. Link is in the show notes. And I'm not going to really read through it on the air or anything, but it was an inspiration for the next little bit here. Basically, something that Phoenix LaFay has heard, and myself as well, is that people who are new to the pagan path are afraid to do something because they're concerned that they're going to do it wrong. And you know what? In some respects, that's a very legitimate fear. I mean, to be afraid of something new is actually really normal. It's not strange. It's not weird. It's not unknown. It's normal. Just like the first ritual you do in a group setting where you're the one leading feels weird. It does. It just straight up feels weird. But you know what? It's okay. It's a new thing. And it's okay to feel weird. But you still need to do it. So it is a little frustrating to me when I'm talking to people who are new to the pagan path. It's like, well, how long have you been a pagan? And they're like, well, I've been, kind of a pagan for a couple of years, but I really don't do much. It's like, well, why not? What holds you back? What's keeping you from doing more? Well, I don't want to do it wrong. Okay. So do some research. You know, read the books. There's actually a lot of information at your local library, generally speaking, depending on how big the community is. A lot of information online. Publications like Pathos is a lot of really good information. The Independent has some information as well. There's the Wild Hunt. There's the Metaphysical Times. You should check out the Metaphysical Times. I'm just saying, there's an article in there that I wrote. There's going to be more articles that I've written, and I'm going to keep doing, so yeah. You read the things, and you journal about it. That's probably the first bit of advice I offer anybody is journal. Do I always follow my own advice? No. But it's part of the reason why I do a show. It kind of holds me accountable. This is my video journal, if you will. And, I see people or I hear people discussing and ask me questions about, well, I'm pretty sure I had this interaction with the divine. Or I think I had a sign, but I don't know what it really means. Or, I got a deck of tarot cards. Actually, the funnier one is, well, I was cleaning my child's room, and they had these books and these tarot cards, and I don't know what they mean. What do I do? Well, you research, and if your child is old enough to get that kind of material without you knowing, why are you still cleaning their room? Seriously. But they don't want to make mistakes, and it's human nature to not want to make mistakes, because often growing up and in our society today, if you make a mistake, it's pointed out. You know you made a mistake. And often when we're told we've made the mistake, the response is not very positive. And it's like, sometimes it's bullying, sometimes it's discipline, sometimes it's a teasing and harassment. Making a mistake is a big deal. And so that fear of the unknown, because it's a new thing, and that fear of making a mistake often causes people to be hesitant when they're doing a ritual or setting up an altar, because they don't want to do it wrong. Actually, setting up an altar, I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't want to do it wrong. Honey, if it's a candle, it's okay. If you throw some sticks on there, it's okay. Your altar is representative of your pagan path and your relationship with the divine. And often, it's not going to be the same as somebody else's. And I've seen a lot of altar pictures and posts and social media, Pinterest, that kind of thing. Some of them, it's like, wow, so did you stage that one? Because that's not an altar. That's a chaos. Are you sure you're doing it right? And it's like people are just trying to show off their altar because they get positive attention that way, and it's an attention-seeking thing rather than representative of their true path. So I wouldn't necessarily follow everything that you see on social media, but it can often give you some direction on what to search for or what to research or the different elements that call to you. For instance, maybe it's a bottle of water that you got when you dipped out of the lake or the river or the ocean or something. Maybe it's rocks that you've collected over the years whenever you've gone on vacation somewhere. It's interesting, the different things that we pick up as we go along through life and in our relationship with the divine. I have a couple feathers that I've got in special places because after putting a question to the divine and my ancestors, I've received these feathers as honestly true signs. One of them, the feather was in a place I hadn't seen any birds and positioned in such a way that I would absolutely notice it, and it was very surprising. It's very treasured. Another one, went to get out of the car, put my foot down, and shoot, there's a feather there that was pretty indicative of the answer I was looking for. So doing the research and figuring out what it is that those things mean. So when I receive the feathers, yep, there I go down the rabbit hole of research. What do different feathers mean from different birds? Because I know which birds they were from, and all that. It's research is fun, I think. And if you're not into research, there's so many books out there. It's insane. It's insane. I do have a short list on the website. It's a short list, I get it. But if you have questions, let me know. wildepaisley@gmail.com. Alan says that he had a paranormal experience once upon a time. Still hasn't figured out if it had meaning specifically or just to show that, the magic is real. In some ways, that showing that magic is real, that is the message. It really is. It's in a way that's almost a harder answer to figure out and understand, because you're like, okay, that's great. Now that I know it's real, now what? What do I do next? You're left kind of adrift. You're just like, I don't have a direction. What am I going to do next? As far as magic goes, yeah, I've experienced it. It's awesome. It's amazing. And it's such a rush. Oh my gosh. When you do it right. Well, for me, when I do it right, it's very energizing. When I do it wrong, or sometimes I overdo it, it's exhausting. But if I do it right, in the right doses, it's great. Write it down, journal it. And if you need additional information in this particular one, Alan, put it out there to your ancestors or your spirit guides or the divine and say, hey, I had this experience. I get it. Magical things are real. But now what? What do I do next? I need a little nudge. And sometimes we need a little bit of a nudge. And that's okay. And I get it. So part of the reason I think why people are afraid of doing it wrong is that assumption. No, assumption isn't the correct word. The dogma that we're raised on, especially with a lot of the Abrahamic paths, is that if I do something wrong, I'm going to be disciplined from on high, struck down by lightning, again, brimstone, hellfire, and damnation, that kind of thing. And so I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to be disciplined. Well, I get it. That's not the pagan path. Now, are some of the deities out there able to, reach out and shake you a little bit if you're doing something not quite right? Yeah, sure. But for the most part, the intention is the foundation of the ritual. So what is it you're intending to do? If you go into a ritual with respect and honor and a true desire to communicate and work with a deity, regardless of what you're doing, you'll be heard. And then it becomes an interaction and a relationship where you're nudged a little bit to understand that relationship more and develop it more and understand what the different things that the deity may prefer for offerings or words. For the most part, I think the deities, unless you're, generally speaking, I should say, deities are okay with contemporary language. You don't have to use an ancient language. Now, some rituals to call upon the old gods do use other languages, mostly because some of those other languages the words had different meanings. It's like the black or blackness. And what does that really mean? What's the word for that? Or the blue or blue or whatever. But if you don't truly understand that language, like fluent, don't use it. Because some of those words that you might use that might seem appropriate have other meanings that are almost counter or opposite to what you're trying to accomplish. So don't necessarily speak or do a spell or ritual in Latin if you don't understand Latin completely. Because you, instead of, calling upon Athena, you might end up calling upon Aphrodite. Athena and Aphrodite have two entirely different goals in mind, and ways they do things. And yeah, so just you need to pay attention. So use the words you know. Don't get fancy about it. Use the tools you know. If you don't feel comfortable using a sword as an athame, then don't. Personally, I like a hunting knife. That's what I have. That's what I use. It was a gift from the divine, 100%. And I marvel at it every time I look at it. Every single time. Because I didn't expect it. And it's there. And I use it. So, then remember, your spiritual path, your pagan path, is your own path. Alan mentions that his experience was in 2017. Sometimes his path takes him through magic, but he doesn't pursue powers or anything like that. I don't either. I ask for guidance more than anything, and direction, and kind of like an open heart surgeon or a brain surgeon might, want to say a couple deep cleansing breaths, and it's like, all right, please guide my hands and don't let them shake. Yeah, that's a big deal. So you don't have to pursue power, but understand it, what it is. I don't necessarily pursue power, but I know what it is. I've seen it. I've experienced it. Just like I've experienced the Karens of the world. They're out there, sadly, and they're reproducing. So think of your rituals and your spell work, I guess, similar to a recipe. I've got a Hershey's cookbook. I like my Hershey's cookbook. I've got a lot of great recipes in my Hershey's cookbook. Do I make some of them? Yes. Do I always use Hershey's cocoa? No. Is the recipe worse for it? No. Just like a recipe might call specifically for Dairy Gold butter. Well, the recipe is calling for Dairy Gold butter because Dairy Gold paid a little bit of money for their name to be put into the recipe by whomever published it. It doesn't have to be specifically that brand. Just like you don't have to have a specific oven or a specific tool set or anything like that when it comes to baking. You can use other things. Like you don't have to use free-range chickens. Maybe you just bought eggs at the store because that was easier. Or maybe you have your own chickens and you don't want to buy the name brand eggs. Whatever it is. Or like peanut butter cookies. Do you have to use Jiffy peanut butter? Nope. Maybe you're going to use Robin Hood peanut butter or store brand peanut butter. It's still peanut butter cookies. So you don't have to use a name brand. Just like if you don't have a specific color for a candle and all you have is white candles, we'll use white candles. The other day I did a bit of a cleansing ritual and healing ritual for some friends that have been ill and dealing with stuff. And I use birthday candles because often the result of the candle burns faster and the energy is hotter and gets out there, and I like to add a little bit of happiness and joy to my rituals and such. So birthday candles to me are a happy thing. I love birthday candles. I used 5 different candles with 5 different colors. I just put them out in their little holders so they could burn. I didn't really pay attention to where they were, what orientation, north, south, east, west, spirit, earth, air, fire, wind, whatever. I just put it out. I let my intuition guide me and did my thing, and that's it. So, when it comes to exploring your spirituality and your pagan path, make sure you also give yourself permission to try things. This is part of the reason why we journal. It's like, hey, I found this ritual, I really like it, and I'm kind of curious, I want to try it, and I'm worried at this, and I don't have this thing, but I have that, and it's close, and the correspondences are similar, and you know what? I'm going to try it. So you write everything down that you're going to try, you do the thing, then you write down the results. Is it what you were hoping for? Is it more? Is it less? What would you do different next time? All of that stuff. That's part of the reason why we journal. So as we're doing things, we're experimenting. I mean, You don't learn something if you don't put yourself out there. Um, I've seen the infographic where it's a circle, and inside the circle, and there's a big circle, and inside the big circle it says comfort zone, and outside of the big circle there's a little circle, and it says success on the inside, and the statement underneath is success never happens inside your comfort zone. And that's true. So, learning more about your spirituality and your pagan path and your connection with the divine or your ancestors or yourself or your family or what have you, often you have to push yourself a little bit. You have to step outside of your comfort zone. Like me starting the process to volunteer with hospice in the local hospital. That's stepping outside my comfort zone a lot. It's one thing to talk about my path online to a bunch of strangers I don't see every day. I just talk to you guys on the weekends or when you send me an email or on social media or whatever, instead of putting myself out there in the local community with people I'm going to see every day. Yeah. It freaks me out, man. But I'm stepping outside my comfort zone to help myself grow. And also, like the friend that's looking for her next grand adventure, I want the pagan community to be more accepted. Locally, North Idaho is generally pretty conservative, especially with religion and such. And not like it used to be. It used to be really bad, but it's much better now. But if I want paganism to be truly accepted by the community, I need to be willing to put myself out there a bit and do some of the groundwork and be willing to represent paganism to the community. Is it hard? Yeah, a little. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Is that okay? Absolutely. It's outside of my comfort zone. But you know what? I'm kind of excited about this because I'm going to learn so much about my own spirituality, about the divine, my relationship with all of it, and also help some people at the same time. Talk about a bunch of wins. Yeah, a lot of wins in that category there. So many. And so in order to do this, though, I had to give myself permission to step outside of my comfort zone and push myself a bit. Just like the book I wrote and published. I had to push myself a bit, step outside of my comfort zone and do it. My comfort zone has gotten away from finishing the illustrations on the second book and writing the third. So I need to poke myself a little bit and kick myself in the butt and get back to doing it instead of some of the other things that I want to do. I need to finish some projects first before I move on to something else. So books need to get done. Alan says he's not a pagan himself. He's an ally to pagans. That's awesome. We need all the allies we can get. And for a lot of reasons, one of the reasons why I appreciate pagans is generally as a group, pagans are open to new things. They're not so hidebound into tradition that they refuse to look at new ideas and new experiences. They're willing to accept the unknown also and look outside of the box and look outside of the dogma. So yeah. Wanda wants to know, what is best to do when everyone makes fun of you and talks behind your back? Well, that one's hard. Bullying at its finest. Sadly, we're not allowed to throw stones. Confrontation, honestly, it's like, hey, you be honest. It's like, why do you do that? I don't feel good about it. You're hurting me. I wouldn't say hurt my feelings. You're hurting me, is a much better statement. And then if it's at work, is it an HR issue? Because you may need to talk to human resources to make sure they understand that, you can make a complaint. It's okay. And if it's a hostile work environment, I'm not sure where you're at, Wanda, but I know here locally, hostile work environments are having to change because wages are going up and employees are leaving places they're not happy. Send me an email, wildepaisley@gmail.com. I have more. I can give you a little bit more time to give you advice and walk you through it. So, anyways, that's the that's it for tonight. We're at the bottom, top of the hour. And yeah, well, maybe we'll talk about that one next weekend. We're going to come up. Or maybe if, there's an idea. Anyways, thanks for listening to me here. I'm Paisley Wild. This has been The Spaces Between. You've been listening to Truth Frequency Radio on YouTube. And thanks for joining all. I appreciate everything you do for me. Merry meet. Merry part. Merry meet again. And we'll see you next weekend.